Welcome to Tales of Hope, where every paw print counts. Animal tie in the house, spreading love, hear the sounds. Every week animal stories, rights and welfare in the mix. Step up, take action, we're giving animals a fix. Tales of Hope, raise your voice, make some noise. Change the game for every animal, girl and boy. One world, one fight, let's turn the page. A future for the voiceless, bring hope to center stage.
Very good morning to everybody, or good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you're in the world. Today, we have Apoorva with us, who's the founder of Animal Law and Policy Network. Apoorva, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for sparing the time to be on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Apoorva, can I ask you what inspired you to establish, first of all, Animal Law and Policy Network, and what is the core mission?
Right. Thank you for that question. So I used to work at a think tank called Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy. And working there for about 2.5 years made me realize that we needed something similar to Vidhi for the animal law and policy space. So an organization that does cutting-edge research on issues involving animals, especially farmed animals, and then advocates for legal reform on those issues. So that's why I decided to start ALPN, because I felt we needed more independent research in the field of animal law and policy. Our fourth mission is to drive legal and policy change on behalf of animals. And one of the things we do is intersectional research to unearth the issues that our legal justice system is facing.
That's quite a work from what I understand. Now, taking it further, can you share a defining moment or a case that deepened your commitment to animal law and policy?
Started with me in my college. We, like most universities, there was a strong opposition to the presence of the community animals within the campus, and we saw that there was an attempt to dislocate the animals from the university campus, and that sort of prompted me and a lot of other people who used to care for these animals to use the law. We were law students, so we prepared a petition using the animal birth control rules, the judgments that said that you cannot relocate stray animals or community animals. And we took them to our vice chancellor and got them to agree to let the dogs stay on campus as long as they were vaccinated. So I think that is what made me realize how valuable law is to just sort of make a difference to the lives of animals around us. Like, you can actually have impact if you know what the law is and what the law says.
That is something is a very debatable question, because since you are all students of law, but people like us, common people who don't even know that there is a law that exists. I'll be very honest. I think up to about 8 or 9 months back, even I didn't know there was an animal law, even though I used to have a lot of fights with my society people and everybody, just to make sure that the kids are not harmed. And I mean, even my 85-year-old mother was threatened. But that's when, I started this podcast, and that's where this whole thing of learning and creating awareness that there is a law for the community. I mean, you want to call them community or strays or indies, whatever you want to call them, but there is a law that protects them. And as a feeder rescuer, there's a lot that is there. But I think a lot of us, we are not even aware that there are these laws that protect us.
Absolutely. I think awareness of laws is really low, especially animal laws, because we just assume that the law doesn't protect animals and the people who care for them, but it does. So we just have to find out. So, and kudos to you for actually starting this podcast and starting this journey of talking about these issues and these legal provisions that can actually help people and animals alike.
You see, to be honest, that was my purpose of actually bringing this podcast, because I, for almost 2 years, went through a lot of issues. I was trying to connect with NGOs, with a lot of people, feeders in my vicinity, the people we're having problems. But yes, there are some, who just don't want to be associated. Everybody wants to do their own thing. But I realized the bottom line is there is a legal framework that protects you. Maybe it is not that strong at this point in time, and we need, people who can raise the voice and say, hey, this is there. It needs to be implemented. So I think implementation part is the awareness, and the implementation parts are two things which we lack in our country at this point in time. So that was my basic purpose or mission when I started this podcast. Now, taking back to the podcast, how was your experience working on judicial reforms and access to justice influenced your approach to animal law?
That's a very interesting question. So I think there have been 2 points in my life where I've observed the judiciary from a distance, from a third person's perspective. The first time was when I worked as a journalist with Mint newspaper in Delhi, and I covered the Delhi High Court and briefly the Supreme Court and other tribunals. And you get to see, as someone who understands the basics of law, you get to observe the system, but from a slight distance. And the second time that happened was when I worked as a judicial reforms researcher. One of the major projects that I worked on while I was working in judicial reforms was a study of POCSO cases in India. So we analyzed child sexual abuse cases, the metadata from these cases for roughly about 4 lakh cases. And to understand, like, how is the judiciary dealing with this act? Like, because this act talks about special courts. So how are they functioning? Are they effective? How much time are they taking to resolve these cases? So I think, and of course, I think, and I worked on cases for the constitution benches of the Supreme Court. So we built a tracker to see where a database of pending constitution bench cases. And I think working in judicial reforms helps you understand the judiciary as an institution, but from a little bit of a distance. What I think took away from that was the judiciary is a very, very important institution of governance, and it plays a very pivotal role in our lives. But I also realized that it has its limitations.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's important to recognize that the judiciary has its limitation. It's the interpreter of the Constitution and legal provisions. It's not their enforcer. The enforcement is part of the executive's domain.
Yes.
Right. So I think I developed more appreciation for the doctrine of separation of powers that says that the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary have separate functions and they maintain checks and balances on each other. But I think the idea being that each has their own domain to function in. So, I think I developed a lot of respect for what the judiciary does, but also an understanding that maybe I think I went away with the feeling that maybe we expect a bit too much from an institution that is underfunded, that is, that is not functioning at optimal capacity, human resource capacity, so it has its own constraints. So I think that way, it reduced the amount of optimism I had from the judiciary. Just seeing the structural issues that the institution faces. If you go to some of the courts in India, there are no washrooms for female litigants. There are basic infrastructural issues. In some courts, judges don't have chambers to say. So the judicial system is in need of urgent reform. So I think we need to sort of start thinking about how much hope we should have from the judiciary as the animal protection movement in India.
Apoorva, I'll tell you what, this has really opened my eyes to a very different perspective. By you giving such an honest answer about, our human expectations from the judiciary, and you bringing it to the light, the most important aspect that, they also have their limitations. The judiciary functions separately. I tell you honestly, for me, I am sure a lot of people who are going to, hear this and watch this, they will also understand that yes, we need to tone down our expectations as well. And we need to see how we can support our judiciary system and the people who enforce it as well. Coming back, how would you assess the current legal framework for animal protection in India? Where does it succeed and where does it fall apart?
I think we have a lot of people think that animal law in India is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, or at max the Wildlife Protection Act, or maybe a couple of provisions of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, which is the replacement of the IPC. So I think we sort of understand that that's where animal law is. Sometimes we forget that its foundation lies in our constitution, that our constitution talks about animals, it talks about prevention of cruelty to animals, in at least the division of legislative powers between different governments. It talks about we have a fundamental duty under the Indian Constitution to have compassion for living creatures. So there are directive principles of state policy, which are basically fundamental principles of governance that are supposed to guide state government and central government when they make laws. They talk about protection of environment, wildlife. So there's so I think, and under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, we have an extensive set of rules. They govern transport, the slaughter of animals, and how it needs to be done. Yes.
Apoorva, your voice has absolutely again gone down.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah, this is much better. Yeah, I think it's your mic position, or is it your this thing, the pods?
I have no idea. Is this okay now?
Yeah, this is much better.
Okay, so what was the part that when my voice went down?
I think it was. I'll tell you what. Let's take this question again. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Apoorva, how would you assess the current legal framework for animal protection in India? Where does it succeed and where does it fall short?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think, in my understanding, and this is, I just want to preface this by saying that this is just my understanding. But in my understanding, the legal system, so far as it governs our relationship with animals, is fairly extensive. Even though the major sort of the legislative basis is the Indian Constitution, the Wildlife Protection Act, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, and the replacement of the IPC, which is the PNS. This is what sort of forms the core of animal law in India. The Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act is not just a legislation. There are a huge number of rules under this law that regulate almost every aspect of our relationship with animals. So from transport of these animals, how they're supposed to be transported, not just by vehicles, but how there's a different set of rules for how our animals are supposed to be transported on foot. There are different rules for how our animals are supposed to be slaughtered. There are different rules for animal birth control and how is that supposed to be done. So there are pet shop rules, there are dog breeding rules, So there's this just world of rules within uh, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. There are rules on animal experimentation that govern how we relate to animals. So I think just the breadth of topics that our laws cover is immense. And I see that as a strength of the system. It shows that we are trying to cover as much ground as possible, and we're able to identify the points of interaction between humans and animals, and we try to regulate them so that neither party suffers any unnecessary harm or suffering, right? But I think uh, and I'm sure you've heard this before, one of the biggest flaws of the animal protection system in India is that it's very anthropocentric. So if you look at the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, there's always a talk about how the penalties are really low, right? Like 50 rupees, 10 rupees, a maximum 100 rupees. So that is, while I agree that is a problem and that needs to sort of be amended, I do believe that there's a bigger problem with the law. It's an it's envisioned as an anti-cruelty law. So it sort of places certain duties on us to not harm animals. It doesn't go into too much detail about how we should shape our relationship with animals. So it's not a fully welfare-based law where we talk about this is what animals need, these are their fundamental freedoms, the five fundamental freedoms we talk about. Uh, so, and that is sought to be corrected in the draft Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Amendment Bill. But as of now, if you look at the law, it's I find it really surprising that the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act actually regulates experimentation on animals within the text of the Basic Act. So the Act itself permits experimentation on animals for the advancement of science. Um, Whether animal testing should be there or should not be there is a separate issue. But including that within the text of the law that is there to protect animals says a lot about uh, how anthropocentric and how human centered it is. The number of exemptions that are included within the law to allow us to do whatever we want to a certain degree. I think it makes me wonder whether, um, I mean, the real objective is um, to the welfare of animals, or is it just to make sure that they aren't treated really terribly? So, yeah.
I mean, as you said, it is your perspective, it's your take. That's very true because let's be politically correct, or however we want to put it across. Given my experience as well has been very disappointing, because I think the PCA law is more, as you rightly said, is more human centric, but it doesn't stop us humans from not harming them. Because for me, in the last 2 years, the kind of things I have gone through, when there are these furry kids that I take care of in my mother's society where she stays. I had to fight with a lot of people, and then when these kids were born, I mean, I tried for the ABC. It's not that I didn't. Everything didn't fall in, timings were wrong. But anyways, I managed to get the ABCs done for all the kids. One I had to take home. Uh, there was no other option. And not only that, but there were people driving cars over these little puppies. They were just like about 2 months, 3 months. I would say there were like, 3 times they did that. 3 times I had to run to the hospital just to make sure that the baby survives. And first of all, we don't have too many of these, what you call the government hospitals. So what you need to do is you need to run to an NGO run hospital which charges you for everything, but you don't care because you care for the life. I mean, for you, the life is more important. For me, I had to even for their vaccinations, I had to pay for from my pockets with a private vet. ABC's done for almost about four of them, five of them, but I realized the whole point was the law is weak. When a person drives a car, I mean, it says, your PCA says you can't maim or you can't do. But when you run down to the police station, you're sitting there for 2-3 hours and nothing happens. All they'll tell you, sir, janwar hai na. It's such a pathetic state that you have to go through. You're sitting there for almost 3 to 4 hours trying to convince that there is a law. You're showing him everything. He's like, sir, छोड़ो ना, हमारे पास इंसानों के लिए केसेस कम है जो जानवरों का केस देखेंगे. So, when you see that, it actually, this is where, the last part of the question was, it falls short. And that is what you said. I mean, for 50 and 10 rupees, forget about the 50 and 10 rupees even. But more importantly, what I see is, the people who are supposed to enforce these laws, like you rightly mentioned in one of your, in our previous conversation, that there is a domain which the judiciary handles is, yes, this is what needs to be implemented. But once there is another set of people or another set of actors who need to implement them, and that's where the enforcers, if they don't enforce the law, I think we common man would always just walk away. Because what I see every day there are, with the kind of network of people that I have, every day I see almost 20 to 30 cases that, people communicate with me and I see them because on the groups that I am and all. The little furry is getting beaten up. There are little furries. I'm just talking about small animals. I'm not even getting into big animals, where we're talking about farming and all those other structures. But even in this small thing, every day almost I see 20 to 30 different cases on an average where, these kids are beaten up. And people do it so violently that they don't care about the law, And that's very disheartening. Somebody, as humans, I think the most important aspect for all of us is to coexist. I mean, we're questioning the Lord's creation, that he created us, but he's also created them. So how can we be treating so cruelly to these animals? Anyways, as we were discussing, it can be a very big debate, on a longer term.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of cruelty around us. But one thing I've understood about crimes against animals, that usually crimes of power. It is a human being asserting that I have power over this job. And that's what sort of, it's often not sort of born out of any hatred towards that animal or any desire to hurt that animal. It's a desire to have control and to show that and to demonstrate that I have control and I am the God, I am now powerful and I can do whatever I want. And I think till we sensitize people to that is not the kind of relationships we should nurture with our fellow beings on this planet. That we should be more compassionate. I think, and that's where I think humane education plays a very important role. I think catching children young when they're still forming their ideas about the world. Right? Being careful in how we communicate about animals in front of our children. I've seen a lot of parents who are scared of animals often transfer that fear to their children. I've always seen that very few parents would encourage their child to go near an animal. Most of them would say, "Nahi, kutta kaat lega. Pass mat jao," right? So they instill that fear very young. Instead of that, if we could talk to our children about how beautiful the world of animals is, how sharp, how intelligent, how like us they are in so many ways. I think that would really sort of make a huge difference. And I know there are a lot of organizations working towards that,
Yes.
but I think that's absolutely, absolutely crucial that we do.
Since I've been doing this, I ran across somebody who does these training sessions for school kids. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of one of such trainings where I had to take my one of the indies, or the babies that I have rescued, that I had to take her so that she could get the kids could get acquainted with the baby in terms of how to approach these furry kids and to get friendly. So yes, I know, but I think I mean I think we're still a long way. Before, yeah, we're still a long way. Anyways, coming back to this whole thing would be, what role does public policy play? No, sorry. That was, what are some of the most urgent legal gaps in India's animal welfare law that needs immediate attention?
I think the most urgent thing that I can think of is amendment of the Financial Cruelty to Animals Act, the major law that governs our relationship with animals. And a draft bill has already been proposed, but it's not coming up in Parliament, despite attempts by many organizations to make sure that this bill is tabled and discussed. It still remains a draft only. So that is definitely one thing. But I think while this is an urgent reform we need, I think there are certain long-term reforms we need as well. And the one thing that I think could really change how we perceive our relationship with animals would be constitutional recognition of animals. Right? This is not a new thing. This is not a radical idea that I'm proposing, right? Switzerland has done it. Germany has done it. And it doesn't say that human rights trump animal rights or animal rights trump human rights. It's not that. It's not as simplistic as that. What they say is that the welfare of animals needs to be things that affect their welfare. So we're not saying that you always do what is right for you. Right? You have to balance different interests, but at least take into consideration how your decisions will impact animals, how a law you make, how a policy you make will impact animals. Sometimes I think we forget that they're living, breathing things, and we sort of just think of them as property, and our law treats them as property. It's also, I think, our language. If you look at the English language, animals are referred to as it, a thing. I think with law, the position is very clear, right? So law cements the relationship of animals as property. So this is a huge reform that a lot of people across the world are working towards. I don't see it coming anytime soon. But the fact that if we could sort of move away from the idea that animals are property, the fact that they're sentient, breathing, living beings, and if our law could recognize that they're capable of suffering, I think that itself would be a step forward. Again, this is not a radical idea. The UK has a Sentience Act. So where they recognize that certain animals are sentient, they recognize facial sentience. So it's not sort of it's not something that I'm just proposing out of thin air, right? It's something that is happening across the world, and I think at least we should start talking about all of this so that we can start working towards seeing that vision materialize.
You rightly said, we all need to start working, and that will only happen when we start talking. And I feel we lack empathy in India a bit. That is where we lack. As humans, uh, it's not, I don't see only with animals, but even with corporate culture. I think the most important aspect that we are all missing out on is the empathy. So,
I think
if,
as Indians, we're a little desensitized to suffering. We see
yes,
suffering a lot. You can't walk on the street without seeing someone in
y-
abject poverty, without seeing, chickens being transported in cramped conditions, without seeing a working animal being beaten by the cart owner, without someone throwing a stone at a dog. So it's just we're surrounded by these things, and I think we all protest to a point, or at least a lot of us do. Um, and eventually we feel so powerless. I think we underestimate how much we're capable of achieving if we only try.
yes,
So we don't do anything at all. So I think there's also a lot of desensitization that happens as we grow up. We see so much suffering. And of course, with animals, it's worse because because there is so much human suffering in India, you're frowned upon for caring about animals. Like, अरे लोग कितना सफर कर रहे हैं तुम्हें जानवरों को पड़ी है.
that's true.
Well, why can't you care about both? I remember when I was very young, I picked up this book by Monica Gandhi called Tales of Fools. I was 12 years old or something. And she said there was a bit in it. I'm not quoting it verbatim, but it was about. She said, I get asked a lot that why don't you care about people, or do you not care about human beings? Um, and she said something which made my life a lot easier after that. The conflict that I felt even as a child caring about animals, because everyone was like, why don't you care about people? And she says that as an animal lover, you don't care less, you care more. You care about people and you care about animals. And that's something I think that has stayed with me. That I think I don't want to forget caring about people, but I also don't want to give up caring about animals. I think that both is very important.
That's a very right thing you said. I think it is people who misunderstand, animal lovers, and they think we care for animals more than the humans. But in reality, it's just that we care for all living beings, and we just want them to have the same dignified life as we humans. And not only that, above all, it's just that we understand their language. I call them voiceless souls, but I know people who work, with animals. They understand their language. We understand. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. The furry kids that I take care of in my mother's building, they don't need to tell me at 7 o'clock they are hungry in the morning. It's like I know that's the time I need to give them food. Apart from that, they don't need to tell me at 5 o'clock. I know when I'm at my mother's place, the 4 days a week, I know at 5 o'clock, I know they need dinner. I mean, it's their dinner time for them. So they don't need to tell me. It's just that it's a natural instinct that I understand, because I know at 5 o'clock when I go down, they're all there. They start running helter skelter. I mean, the moment I open my house door only, they'll be all right outside the door. So, it's like we understand. I think we empathize more with them. As humans, see, we are capable. If you're hungry, I tell people very simply, when people tell me, Anil, you care, I tell them very simply, you feel hungry, you can walk into the kitchen and get your food. What about this soul? Which kitchen is he going to walk? He's going to be scavenging. He or she is going to be scavenging and not 100% sure that she will find something or he will find something. At least if we can, put food for them, that's something I feel, or from my spiritual perspective, I feel that's a part that I have been allocated by the supreme being, that you need to take care of these beings. So that's all I do from my side. But as I said, we understand them a bit better than a lot of other people.
I think all animals communicate, and we follow voiceless because we are able to understand them, what they're saying. So I feel and I haven't met a more expressive person than my cat. She tells me when she wants to be pet. She tells me when she's had enough pets. She tells me when she's hungry. You just have to be willing to understand. They communicate. It's maybe a language we don't understand, but they do speak.
Abs-
It's almost like someone who speaks German, not understanding Hindi and saying that I am voiceless because I'm speaking in Hindi. They just don't understand my language. It's the same thing. We just don't understand their language. And this is not something I say out of emotions, right? There's a lot of science behind it. There are scientists, there are ethologists who studied how these animals communicate. And even small animals like ants communicate. So they have ways of communicating with each other. They're just probably not sophisticated enough to understand.
See, this is where it is when you said, your cat comes and tells you when she wants to be petted, and when she doesn't, she's had enough. I have 3 at my home as well, and all the 3 have their different personalities. I have 2 labs and 1 indie, one male, 2 females now. But the thing is, all the 3 have a different personality, and like you said, they talk to you in the language that you need to understand. And if you can, correlate with their signs or how they come and behave, it's just about understanding. As I said, even these furries that I take care of at my mother's building, they speak differently as compared to the kids that are at my home. And especially now, I am learning so much from them, especially after we've got the 3rd one from my mother's building who I rescued. 2 of them are actually rescued, what I have. And this 3rd one has changed, so much in us and the way we look at her. Because for the first 4 months, she was on the streets in the building. And now for the last, since December, it's almost coming to 5-6 months, she's been in the house. And it's been for her also, it's been a change. But we are also understanding so much from her in terms of how she used to deal, things differently, because I've seen her right from the day she was born, this little one as well. So the way she used to behave here and the way she behaves at home with me and my wife, it's a very different, in the last, I said, since December, 5-6 months, she's evolved so much. And, not only that, we have evolved with her, to be honest. It's more of that. Anyways, and there was, what you said about research that is there. If I'm not mistaken, recently I saw one of the documentaries on Netflix where people at Harvard, there was these 2 doctors who are doing serious research in terms of how they communicate, how these small animals communicate, especially with dogs and cats. They've been working a lot towards that. I've been trying to reach out to them and see how, what is the kind of research and what is the kind of feedbacks or things that, would help us as well, evolve. But yes, there is so much that we can learn from them. Anyways, now coming back to the next question would be, how does India's constitutional framework support the protection of animals, and where do you see conflicts in its application?
So, as far as the Constitution is concerned, I've mentioned that we have a fundamental duty to have compassion for living creatures, even though fundamental duties are not enforceable in the sense that if we don't follow a duty, no one could go to court and say, hey, this person is violating their fundamental duty. But I think, it says where the moral compass of the nation is. Right? It does denote that. There are certain other provisions. There is a directive principle that allows for that sort of empowers governments at the center, at the state level, to ban cow slaughter, for instance, and promote certain breeds, indigenous breeds. So, native breeds. There are some of these provisions in the Constitution where I see a lot of, and there are provisions for wildlife, but I think I see a lot of conflict when it comes to our fundamental rights and animal rights. So I think some of these provisions are very difficult to implement because to what extent they to, so the right to food and right to eat, choose what you want to eat, these can be read within the right to life of a person. And there's been judgment from the High Court in Bombay related to the right to food when it comes in the context of peace. So there is that conflict, right? Where what if I think the Constitution is, and how the courts have interpreted it is sort of it tries to balance the two. Sometimes I think the balance tilts too much in favor of humans, but yeah, I think so. I think where our rights are involved. So also, like for instance, right to practice a certain profession. So if I'm someone whose livelihood is slaughtering animals, can you sort of ban that? There are certain cities in India where sale of meat is banned. But, not just during certain festivals, just overall meat and eggs are banned in say Rishikesh and Manipureti in those areas. There have been cases where people have gone to court and said, "Hey, but this is my livelihood," and the courts have said, "You know what? We need to protect religious sensibilities right now, and it's okay. The ban stays." So I think there are within the I think the Constitution does give us guidance on how our relationship with animals needs to be shaped, but because none of these provisions are enforceable, it's just sort of it's like gyan. It's up to you whether you choose to follow that or not. But there are definitely some conflicts when it comes to Constitution and animals.
Thank you for being so upfront, about it.